So today I'm just going to be speaking about some methodological procedures that we tried to develop in our ESRC funded project, looking at how people access high cost credit via different kinds of digital interface and the kind of differences that accessing credit via digital interfaces, especially mobile devices like smartphones, kind of changes people's experiences and understandings and decision making around taking on credit or not. So over the past 5 years, social scientists across a range of disciplines have highlighted how contemporary life is now mediated through digital interfaces, websites and apps. And in response, social scientists have explored how to research and analyse new digitally enabled and mediated systems of economic, cultural and political communication and practice. Approaches to these so-called digital methods have taken a number of forms. For instance, as Gillian Rose argues, cultural geographers, sociologists and others have modified and applied existing types of quantitative and qualitative analysis to digital platforms. And this has taken many guises, including the development of ethnographic approaches into netographies, discourse analysis into digital discourse analysis, quantitative content analysis and into interactive visualization, and so on. So alongside these modifications, Gillian has also pointed to the rise of new forms of digital method that work to take into account the particularity and idiosyncrasies of digital systems, their inherently responsive nature, and the rise of big data algorithms that create and order content. And in doing so, these kinds of analyses often attempt to reveal that which is hidden from users, or in the words of DeVille and Belden, the problem the methods respond to is, quote, how to make that which is rendered invisible, visible, end quote. So what is often considered to be invisible and require this kind of exposure are the logics and techniques used by companies like Facebook or Twitter to aggregate data, the kinds of data they specifically aggregate and analyse, and how this data is passed on to and shared with government agencies and the private sector. So despite the differences in the focus of these kinds of approach, whether they theorise and study digital platforms as sites of discursive production, algorithmic governance or surveillance, these processes are often placed in contrast to the surface appearance of interfaces, which are mainly considered to be significant only as a means of obscuring and glossing over these regimes of discursive production, aggregation, analysis, and so on. So, rather than focusing exclusively on how interfaces naturalise the production of social and political discourse, or treating the surface of interfaces as no more than the outcome of the hidden generative mechanisms of code and software, what I argue in this paper and what I argue along with my co-authors is that it is through interfaces that digitally mediated and organised life is constituted. For it's through interfaces that people encounter digital content. And interfaces are actively designed to modulate user action with the aim, hope and promise of producing desirable outcomes for those that own and operate such interfaces. And what we suggest is that most of these design elements of what appears in an interface do not operate exclusively on a linguistic representational register, but involve other modulations and modifications, such as the placement of buttons and menus, the layout of checkout pages, the colour of backgrounds, and the design of sound effects and haptic feedback. And through organising these elements, designers seek to modulate how users respond to, interact with, and experience these services on a series of affective and emotional registers. So responding to these types of techniques, today we want to offer a conceptual vocabulary, a methodological vocabulary, in order to understand how interfaces modulate user action. And at the heart of this vocabulary is a treatment of interfaces as compositions of objects, which we term units, whose appearances can never simply be reduced to their visual design or form on a screen. And developing what we term a post-phenomenological vocabulary, by which we mean a focus on the way objects appear to one another outside of a human-object relation, as well as the way objects appear to humans, using a language drawn from sound and music, the paper suggests that each unit of an interface vibrates to emit what we term a tone. And so developing a language of unit, vibration and tone, we suggest, offers a method for analysing how interfaces attempt to shape, guide, or otherwise affect action on a series of embodied and affective levels. So, to begin with, how might we conceptualise the relationships between the different types of content, such as maps, graphs, images, texts, and buttons, that tend to compose digital interfaces? Furthermore, how might we develop a shared methodological vocabulary to understand how different kinds of interfaces modulate user action? Rather than thinking about interfaces as composed of content that can be organised into categorical types, such as image or text, we suggest that the first step is to consider all parts of an interface as equally modular units. Now, modularity refers to the idea that each part of an interface is more or less detachable from other parts. And Levmanovich summarises this idea quite nicely. A new media object has the same modular structure throughout. Media elements, be it images, sounds, shapes, or behaviours, are represented as a collection of discrete samples: pixels, polygons, voxels, characters, scripts. Now, these elements are assembled into larger scale objects, but they continue to maintain their separate identity. The objects themselves can be combined into even larger objects, again without losing their independence. An example of modularity is the structure of a HTML document. With the exemption of text, it consists of a number of separate objects: GIFs, JPEG files, media clips, VRMLCs, shockwave and flash movies, which are all stored independently, locally, and or on a network. End quote. So, as Manovich suggests, an interface is not one thing, but many different units that are assembled together to create an overall function or effect. And from this perspective, an interface is not then just a set of representations, texts, or discourses, even though of course it may contain these, and these may be very important. Rather, it is a set of small machines, each of which is independent from, but also linked to one another. So putting this idea of modularity into methodological practice, how might we identify the particular units that make up an interface? And we begin by asking what appears as a distinct entity for the user of the interface. And in visual terms, interfaces are often designed as a series of boxes that are separated using lines, shading, contrasted colouring, and other forms of differentiation. This makes different pieces of content clearly visible and identifiable for the user. And in turn, this principle and practice of interface design provides a simple way to begin to identify and differentiate between these types of unit. So for example, upon opening the Facebook iPhone app, a number of units can be identified. At the top of the screen there is a search box, which is dark blue, rectangular unit with a magnifying glass icon and the word search displayed in a lighter blue colour within it. Below this there is a What's on Your Mind unit, which is a white rectangular box with the user's profile picture on the left and What's on Your Mind text in light grey to the right. There are also a number of other boxes and features, including a newsfeed unit, which contains a series of news items in individual white boxes, and the profile picture and name of these who posted these stories. At the bottom of the screen, there are also a series of individual icons that lead to other parts of the app and could also be classified as units, such as a friend request page and a marketplace page. Of course, a unit is not just what visually appears on a screen. A unit might also be a particular sound effect that forms part of an interface, or a mechanical button that activates a particular function of an interface. Or in relation to the haptic feedback on a smartphone, the unit might be the particular intensity and length at which a haptic motor rumbles inside the smartphone in relation to a specific function of an app. So having very briefly defined these units of study, the second step that we suggest a post-phenomenological approach to interfaces would take then is to identify how each unit that makes up the interface communicates with other units in the interface and with users. So to theorize how different units communicate with each other and the user on a series of non-discursive and habitual levels, we suggest developing the concept of vibration. And according to McLaren, vibrate can be traced to the Latin word vibratus, which means to move quickly to and fro, or shake, which itself has roots in words referring to the wagging of a dog's tail, swinging, or swiping. So using a sonic term like vibration allows us to understand how particular parts of an interface communicate with the user to prime and shape various responses and actions on a series of material and habitual levels. And we can identify at least 4 aspects of a unit's vibration: the amplitude, frequency, rhythmic articulation, and resonance. Although for the sake of time today, we can only really talk about one of those, which is this idea of amplitude. So the term amplitude can help us understand how different units that make up an interface encourage or discourage interaction without explicit linguistic representational signposting, such as words or labels. In relation to interfaces, amplitude can be defined as the strength of emission of the vibrations of a unit. Now, units can emit stronger amplitude vibrations or weaker amplitude vibrations, we suggest. A unit could be said to have weaker amplitude vibrations when it is static or non-interactive. Conversely, a unit could be said to have a stronger amplitude vibration when it is interactive and it is clear what the unit is for and how it operates. So what does that mean? That sounds kind of abstract. An example of a weaker amplitude unit would be the progress indicator on the application pages of Wonga.com. When a user clicks the apply button on Wonga.com, they are taken through a series of application pages. These pages ask for a range of personal and financial information that are used to help Wonga decide whether to accept a user's application or not. And our progress through these pages is represented by a blue line at the top of the screen with 5 equally spaced circles along this line. As the user inputs information and moves through the pages, the lines and circles with each associated page turns blue until the application is complete. The progress indicator vibrates then with a weak amplitude because it is embedded on the application page as a static image, meaning that the user cannot use the indicator to click forward and back through the application process after they have completed each section. If a user could move backwards and forwards using the progress indicator bar, then this would be an example of a high amplitude unit. The progress indicator bar is presumably designed to emit a weak amplitude in order to give users a sense of control over the application process by letting them know how close they are to completion, while simultaneously trying to stop them from returning to the previous parts of the form. Now, we know this from our interviews with the designers of these types of interface. Keeping the user moving through the process is important in order to minimize any delay that might give rise to doubt or reflection, which might result in the user leaving the application process and not applying for a loan. As such, the weak amplitude of the progress indicator on Wonga.com is designed to minimize thought or reflection on the part of the user while reinforcing a sense of control over the process in order to increase the rates at which the users visit Wonga.com and complete the loan application process. So now we have established how to identify these units that make up interfaces and just one way that they communicate with the user through this notion of amplitude. This allows us to demonstrate how the various aspects of a unit's vibrations are designed to shape what could be called the unit's overall tone. So for our purposes, tone can be defined as the effects created by a combination of vibrations and how these combinations are designed to create an overall feel of an interface, kind of affective sense, the overall feel of an interface. So to make sense of this idea of tone, very concretely, let's turn to the iOS Facebook app's reaction unit. Within the timeline news unit on the Facebook iOS app, users can react to posts using emojis, these graphical icons you can see there. When the user taps the reaction button, the emojis are animated and express different emotions through various forms of movement, such as raising their eyebrows or opening their mouths. So we could name this overall tone of this kind of unit as kind of playful or inviting. And this particular tone is constituted by the way various aspects of its vibration are organized. For example, the reaction unit could be said to express a strong amplitude through the way the animation of the emoji faces invites interaction. The winking, nodding, and smiling emojis call out to the user, effectively asking them to slide their finger along the unit to select one. When the user does select a face, this increases the size of the face, thus amplifying its presence within that unit. At the same time, this unit also expresses, and this is drawing on some other language we develop in the paper, low-frequency vibrations through the speed and repetition of the animations of the emoji faces. When opening the unit, each face expresses an emotion through moving its mouth, eyes, and so on. Now, these animations are around 2 seconds in length and loop continuously, regardless of whether the user is selecting that particular face. And this encourages the user to spend a little time examining what each face does before choosing a particular reaction to add to their Facebook post. Well, that's what Facebook want it to do. In this case, the tone of the unit is highly relational in the sense that it is designed to increase engagement with the news feed, including paid adverts that are displayed on the news feed. And that's why Facebook developed these kinds of features, to encourage people to spend more time on the app, increase engagement, and thus increase engagement with adverts, and so on and so forth. So, analysing how units vibrate and these kinds of different tones that units produce, we suggest provides a vocabulary for understanding how seemingly flat images affect and move the body of users in a variety of ways, which are actively designed to elicit particular responses that benefit the owners and operators of these interfaces. So to conclude then, we hope that by offering the beginnings of a methodological vocabulary based on sound, offers new and novel ways of analysing the specifics of digital modulation, and in turn provides alternate approaches to studying digital interfaces and apps, which make up the basis of so much kind of engagement in and around smart cities. So if you are interested in the paper at all, it just came out this year, so you're welcome to look at it. And I think that's me.